Okay, welcome back. We're on page 56 now, talking about the categories of SQL commands. So there's three big categories. There's one called the Data Definition Language, DDL, which is all about like creating a table or modifying a table or dropping a table. And then a Data Manipulation Language, which is about querying a data to get answers, or inserting data, or deleting a row of data, that kind of thing. And then a Data Control Language, DCL, which is all about permissions, granting permissions or revoking permissions and things of that nature. There are others, but the big three are the ones we're interested in. Let's just go through one more time. So DDL is creating things. I create a table. Okay. I modify a table. I make a table go away. So it's all about the big thing. DML is about rows. I add a row, delete a row, change a row. Okay, not the table, just a single row. Okay. And then data control language is, do I have permissions to read this table or write to this table, right? That kind of stuff. Okay. There are others. There's one called a transaction control language, TCL. And that one is not quite as standard as it probably needs to be because a lot of vendors just do it differently. And then there's one called persistent stored modules. Ooh, that's a cool word. Basically, it's writing a small application using SQL. Actually, they have, a where clause and if clause and loops and, I mean, they have just everything you could do in a normal program, you could probably do using the persistent stored module language part. So each vendor is pretty much well allowed to kind of do their own thing. Most vendors get the DDL, DML, and DCL parts the same, but they kind of go wild after that. So if you think about it, maybe the whole standards idea really wasn't all that great because all it did was standardize a tiny part of this whole thing. So learning the three categories, that would be something that might be on a test question, okay? So yeah, you need to learn the three categories. So look on page 56. Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to load a Microsoft Access database. So I assume you've downloaded the student data files from the Canvas course under supplemental materials. So we're going to double click on this guy and just keep drilling through it until it makes sense. Obviously, we're going to be using Microsoft Access, so that's where that is. And we're in Chapter 2, so that makes sense. And then there's two of these guys named Cape Cod. We want to get the one that says 92 in the title. Now I'm just going to grab this guy and just drag and drop him onto my Documents folder. And then go to my Documents folder and just double click on him just the way you would any other, Microsoft Office application. Just double click and then presto change you at lunches. So the difference between the 92 and the not 92 is that standard thing. Microsoft Access kind of sort of wants to be compatible with the SQL 92 standard. Now, it is not 100% compatible, but it's close. And I think the reason why they did that is to make it easier to transition between Microsoft Access and Microsoft SQL Server. That's just my guess. Okay, so the first thing we're going to learn on page 57 is the select statement. We're going to spend an awful lot of time talking about the select statement, almost for the rest of this chapter. It's always going to be on the select statement. Okay, so I'm going to go here. Now, this is kind of weird. See how we have the create guy? And you might think that query wizard might be the way you want to do it. It's like, do I want to do query design or query wizard? Let's try the query design button. And then up here, it gives you three different views, the design view and the query view. So I'm just going to stick with the query view. Now, when you're in here, in the query view, see how the tabs have changed? Okay, this is kind of important, all right? Because when we're done here, I need to be able to do something with this. So if I said select asterisk from buyer, why buyer? Because that's the first table here. So I'm going to hit the run button here. Now, if you haven't done it the way I've done it, then you won't get this tab. You're going to need that guy. And boink. And so it pops out to this grid view is what I call it. Okay? And so it shows me the answers. Now, how do you get back to the SQL? That's kind of important. So one of the easy ways to do it is just to go here and go back. So, you hit run, and then you automatically get this view, and then once you change the view, you change it to the data sheet view, right? So that's how you get back and forth. Now, if you get completely lost, which happens from time to time, just remember if you go back to the create guy and get the query design done, and as soon as you click on that, then you'll get all this stuff. And see, I don't particularly like all this add-on junk here of making things easy, so I just want to go directly to the SQL view, not using any of the tools. Okay, so the select statement. So I can type select asterisk from. So right now you've already learned two SQL commands, the select statement and the from clause. And the from is the table where it's coming from. So for example, buyer. Okay, so far so good. Woohoo! Boy, you guys are moving on. Now, in addition to just the asterisk, which was what I showed, I'm going to go back to here. Instead of doing asterisk, I could actually put in something else. I could, for example, put in something like select SKU, comma, SKU description, where I can just tell which things I want, okay, from SKU data. Okay, so now I'm not getting everything, I'm only getting the things I asked for. So right off the bat, an asterisk means I want all the columns. By the way, asterisk is not a wildcard, okay? It's not pattern matching going on here. Asterisk basically means all. Give me all columns. You could specify, in addition to using the asterisk, you could tell which columns you wanted. Okay, let me just do something here. Is this stuff case sensitive? So for example, if I go in here and type SKU in lowercase, whoops, got in the insert mode. Is that going to make a difference? Is it going to come back and say, oh, I'm sorry, man, I don't have anything called lowercase SKU. No, it is not case sensitive. Okay, that's a little weird. Okay, so the select has column names that you want, or asterisk if you want them all. Okay. If there is more than one, then you separate the column names by a comma. Okay, pretty straightforward. The entire line could be terminated with a semicolon. I don't typically do that in class, but you may see it in the textbook like this or in other examples. What that basically means is I'm done, okay? Because sometimes I want a single line, single SQL statement to appear in multiple lines. And so this just makes it perfectly clear that that is the end of line, okay? So the next thing is, hey, let's say I'm inside the query guy here, and I want to put a comment in. Well, Microsoft Access doesn't have a way of doing comments, unfortunately, not here, not at the query prompt, but in other ones we'll get to. I'm going to go ahead and pretend like it does. I'm going to do slash asterisk, and then this is a comment. Now this is not going to work, okay? But when we get to SQL Server, this will work. So I'm going to go ahead and hit run. It's going to come up and go, what? What are you talking about? So this doesn't work for us here, but I went ahead and mentioned it because sooner or later we're going to be using comments. Okay. Now, what about the order of the columns? For example, what happens if I put SKU at the bottom? Is that going to make a difference? Oh, can I even have two columns like that? Can I use the same column twice? Sure, machine don't care. So the order of the columns as they appear in the statement is the order of the results. Okay, kind of sort of makes sense. Okay. So select buyer in department, or select department from buyer. It generates the same data, it just puts the columns in a different order. There's also some things you can do. This is going to sound a little weird, so I'm going to go back and use an example I have here, where I have department, comma, buyer from SKU data. Okay, I'm just want to make sure, I always hit this just to make sure I didn't make a mistake. Okay, so I've got some stuff here. Well, one of the things you can add into the things that appear in a select clause is I can put in constants. Now you might think, Well, why would I ever want to do that? Well, right now, the answer is no, you wouldn't. But sooner or later, we might. So I'm going to put in like 100. Then I'm going to go over here and say, I don't know, something like hello. Okay, let's see what that does. It put a 100 in here and put a hello in there. I mean, okay, you might look at that and go, wow, that was interesting. But trust me, later on, it will actually make a little bit of sense. So right now, let's talk about the things that appear in the select clause. Column list, asterisk. The order of the columns kind of sort of matters. You can put in a constant. These are called literals, by the way. A numeric literal or a string literal. That's kind of a cool thing. Okay. So remember we talked about the SQL 92 kind of a thing? There is a way that you can actually go into Microsoft Access and tell it, I'm going to have to get back to where I was here, to go into the object designer and tell it whether or not you want to have all of your stuff done in SQL 92 from now on. Now, we don't have to do that because we chose the correct starting location where that stuff was turned on. So most people don't use the older SQL 89 version and want to use the SQL 92. So you might want to click on both, this database and the default for all new databases that you create. Okay, that would be kind of cool. So if I want to run a query, I kind of showed you that we have this thing called a query designer. I don't particularly like, I'm going to go ahead and hit the query wizard. Yeah, okay, fine. Actually, I'm just going to delete that guy. I don't need any changes to it. I'm going to use the query wizard one. It basically comes up and says, oh, what do you want here? And it's like, geez, I don't know. Okay, and so what do you want from the buyer table? Well, I want the department. Oh, no, let's do SKU. So I want the department, and I want the buyer. And then I go next, and it says, okay, are you ready to do this? And I go, yeah, sure, go right ahead. And ta-da, it did the thing for me. And then it saved it for me down here as a query. Okay, I don't particularly like that because you don't actually learn what we're supposed to be learning here. Okay, but so I always want you to go to the designer and then turn off the designer by going straight to the SQL statement itself. Okay, so for all of your homework assignments that use Microsoft Access, I want you to do it this way. Okay, let's continue. So the next thing we're going to do is filtering. So I'm going to filter this stuff because I don't want all the data in the table. I want just part of the data in the table. Okay? So one of the things I want to do is I'm going to filter to get rid of duplicates. Remember this guy here? I'm going to get rid of this guy. And where I did the I did buyer and department from SKU data. Dang it, I gotta spell it right for this thing to work. Okay, one more time. All right, so there's an awful lot of duplicates there for whatever reason. So I want to undo the duplicates. So there's a new thing you can add to the select statement. It's called unique, or distinct rather. Distinct. And distinct will run the same query, but just cut all the duplicates out. Okay, so that's pretty cool, right? I mean, you can use this to reduce the amount of things so you don't have any duplicates. Cool. And the other one you can use, another one of the key words that you can use, is I can use top. So I don't want them all, but let's say I want the top, I don't know, 5, okay? And hit return. And boing, it just gives me the top 5 in the list. Okay, it kind of makes sense. So let's just review. Things that can appear in a select clause. Well, asterisk, column, the distinct keyword, top keyword, those constants. Remember all that? Okay, good. So those are all the things that can appear in a select clause. Okay, as usual, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, so hang on. We'll continue this in just a minute.